She repaired the cub's bent ear with tape. Part 1. The ship was falling apart around her when Park made peace with death. Red lights flashed everywhere. Alarms screamed so loud she could feel them in her teeth. The research vessel Horizon's Edge had been her home for 18 months, and now it was breaking into pieces as it fell toward the green moon below. She was the ship's doctor. A simple job, really: treat minor injuries, hand out medicine for headaches, run health checks on the crew. Nothing exciting ever happened on geological survey missions. Until the engine exploded. Strapped herself into the emergency pod and hit the launch button. The force slammed her back into the seat. Through the tiny window, she watched the main ship break apart in a ball of orange fire. 12 crew members, 12 friends, gone in seconds. The pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Closed her eyes and thought about her mother back in. She thought about the cherry blossoms in spring. She thought about the small apartment she would never see again. Then everything went black. She woke up to pain. Her whole body hurt, but she was alive. Somehow, impossibly, she was alive. The pod had crashed in a forest. Green light filtered through strange trees with bark that glowed faintly blue. The air smelled sweet, almost like honey, but with something sharp underneath. Checked herself for injuries, cuts and bruises, maybe a cracked rib, nothing fatal. She spent the first day salvaging supplies from the pod: medical kit, emergency rations, water purifier, solar charger, a small knife, a thin emergency blanket, not much but enough to survive for a while. The forest around her was unlike anything she had seen before. The plants glowed at night with soft colors, blue and green and purple. Strange insects with too many wings buzzed between flowers that opened and closed like breathing lungs. She saw no animals on that first day, but she heard them, calls and howls in the distance. Some sounded almost like wolves. On the second day, she found a stream with clean water. She set up a small camp nearby, using branches and her emergency blanket to make a shelter. She ate half a ration bar and tried not to think about how few she had left. On the third day, they found her. Was collecting water when she heard the snap of a branch behind her. She turned slowly, expecting some kind of animal. What she saw made her freeze completely. They stood on two legs like humans, but that was where the similarity ended. They were tall, much taller than her, covered in thick fur that shifted between and brown. Their faces were long like wolves, with black noses and sharp teeth visible when they breathed. Their ears were huge, standing straight up from their heads, turning this way and that to catch every sound. There were 5 of them. All carried spears with black stone tips. All stared at her with eyes the color of amber. His heart beat so fast she thought it might burst. She had no weapon, nowhere to run. These creatures could kill her in seconds if they wanted. The largest one stepped forward. His fur had streaks of silver in it, marking him as older than the others. He moved with the confidence of a leader, each step careful and controlled. He stopped 2 meters away from and tilted his head, studying her. Seconds passed. They felt like hours. The silver-furred creature made a low sound in his throat. Not a growl, not a threat, more like a question. His ears swiveled forward, focused entirely on her. Raised her empty hand slowly, showing she had no weapon. She kept her movements small and calm. She had no idea if these creatures understood body language the same way humans did, but she had to try something. The leader watched her hands. Then he looked at her face again. Something shifted in his amber eyes. Not friendliness exactly, but not hostility either. Curiosity, maybe. He turned and made a sharp gesture with his spear toward the east. Then he looked back at and grunted. The meaning was clear: follow. Had a choice. She could refuse and probably die alone in this forest within weeks, or she could follow these strange wolf-like creatures and see what happened. She followed. They walked for hours through the glowing forest. The creatures moved fast, their long legs covering ground quickly, but they slowed down when fell behind. They did not help her, but they did not hurt her either. They simply waited until she caught up, then continued. As the sun began to set, they emerged from the trees into a wide valley. Hot springs steamed between ancient trees with trunks as wide as houses, and there, spread across the valley floor, was a settlement. Hundreds of structures made from woven branches and dried mud, hundreds of the wolf-like creatures going about their lives, adults carrying baskets, children playing in the shallow springs, elders sitting by fires, their fur gone completely silver with age. They had a civilization. The hunting party led through the settlement. Every creature they passed stopped to stare at her. Mothers pulled their children close. Warriors gripped their weapons. The air filled with whispers and growls. Kept her eyes down and followed the silver-furred leader. He brought her to a small hut at the edge of the village, far from the central area. He pointed at it with his spear, then pointed at her. Then he turned and walked away without looking back. Stood alone in front of the hut. The whole village watched her from a distance. No one approached. No one spoke to her. She understood. She was being tolerated, not welcomed. She was allowed to exist here, but she was not one of them. Maybe she never would be. She entered the hut and sat down on the dirt floor. Through the gaps in the woven walls, she could see the strange stars appearing in the darkening sky. None of them looked familiar. She was alone, truly alone. Millions of kilometers from Earth, from humanity, from everything she knew. But she was alive. For now, that would have to be enough. She repaired the cub's bent ear with tape, Part 2. Days turned into weeks. Learned to survive in her small hut at the edge of the village. The creatures she learned called themselves She could not speak their language at first, but she listened carefully. Their words were a mix of growls, clicks, and soft sounds made deep in the throat. Slowly she began to understand simple things. Water, food, yes, no, danger. No one taught her. She learned by watching and listening, the same way a child learns. The silver-furred leader was named. He was the head of the clan, respected by everyone. His mate was a fierce huntress named Bora, who had dark brown fur and eyes that could cut like knives. Bora did not like. She watched the human constantly, always suspicious, always ready for trouble. Did not blame her, she was a stranger here, an alien, she would be suspicious too. The left food outside her hut each morning. Simple things. Dried meat, strange fruits with purple skin, sometimes a fish from the stream. Never saw who brought it. They came before sunrise and left before she woke. She spent her days observing the village. They were more advanced than she first thought. They made pottery and wove cloth from plant fibers. They had tools of stone and bone, carefully shaped for different purposes. Their buildings were simple but strong, built to last through storms and seasons. They had no writing as far as she could tell, but they had art. Beautiful carvings decorated their homes, showing hunting scenes and family histories. They had music too, drums and flutes made from hollow reeds. On some nights, the whole village gathered to sing songs that made heart ache with their strange beauty. She began to see them as people, not humans but people all the same. They loved their children. They mourned their dead. They laughed and argued and made peace. They were not so different from her own kind, really. 3 weeks after her arrival, everything changed. It happened in the afternoon, when the sun was high and warm. Was sitting outside her hut, trying to repair a tear in her jacket, when she heard shouting from the center of the village. Not angry shouting, scared shouting, panicked. She stood and looked toward the central fire pit. A crowd had gathered there, bodies pressed tight together. Someone was crying, a high sound full of pain. Hesitated. She was not welcome there. They tolerated her, but she was not part of the clan. Going to the center of the village might cause trouble. But the crying continued, and something in could not ignore it. She walked toward the crowd. They stepped aside as she approached, more from surprise than respect. She pushed through the last row of bodies and stopped. A young cub sat in the arms of his mother, tears running down his furry face. He was small, maybe the size of a human 5-year-old. His fur was light, soft and fluffy like all young. His eyes were huge and wet with crying. And his left ear was bent. It should have stood straight up like his other ear, tall and proud. But instead it folded over on itself at an ugly angle, drooping down the side of his head like a wilted flower. The clan healer knelt before the cub. She was ancient, her fur completely white, her movements slow and careful. Her name was, and she was said to be the of all the. She examined the cub's ear with gentle hands. She touched it softly, felt along its length, made quiet sounds of concern. Then she stood and shook her head. The mother let out a wail that cut through's heart. She held her son, rocking back and forth, her grief loud and raw. Did not understand at first. A bent ear seemed like a small thing. Surely it was not worth such pain. But then she looked at the faces around her. They stared at the cub with pity and horror, as if he had been given a death sentence. Some turned away, unable to look. Others whispered to each other in low, sad voices, and began to understand. The ears, of course, the ears were everything. They used them to communicate across distances, turning them to catch sounds from far away. They used them for hunting, listening for prey in the deep forest. A with damaged ears was disabled in the deepest way possible. They could not hunt. They could not hear warnings of danger. They could not participate fully in clan life. She remembered something else she had noticed. All that she had seen had perfect ears, every single one, not one bent, not one damaged. Because those cubs did not survive, or they were sent away, abandoned to die in the forest perhaps. That was how nature worked. The weak did not last. This cub, this small crying child, had just been sentenced to that fate. The healer tried other things. She rubbed herbs on the ear. She chanted words that might have been prayers. She waved a rattle made of bones over the cub's head, calling on spirits or gods that did not know. Nothing worked. The ear stayed bent. The mother's crying grew louder. Stood at the edge of the crowd, his face grave. Even Bora looked sad, her usual hostility replaced by genuine sorrow. The healer stepped back. There was nothing more she could do. And looked at that bent ear, really looked at it, and saw something that made her breath catch in her throat. The cartilage was not broken. It was not damaged beyond repair. It was simply bent, folded in the wrong direction, probably from sleeping on it wrong during the early growth period. She had seen this before. In dogs, in cats, in the floppy-eared puppies at the shelter where she volunteered as a teenager. The solution was so simple, so incredibly, stupidly simple. Before she could stop herself, spoke. "Wait." Every eye turned to her. The crowd went silent. Bora's hand moved to the knife at her belt, but was not looking at them. She was looking at the cub, at his bent ear, at the tears on his small face. And she knew she had to try. She repaired the cub's bent ear with tape. Part 3. The silence was absolute. Every in the crowd stared at as if she had grown a second head. No one moved. No one breathed. His heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She walked forward slowly, keeping her hands visible, making no sudden movements. The crowd parted for her, though she could feel their tension like heat from a fire. The cub's mother pulled her son closer, fear and confusion in her amber eyes. The healer watched approach with a strange expression, somewhere between curiosity and offense. Bora's fingers tightened on her knife. Stopped in front of the mother and the cub. She knelt down slowly, bringing herself to their level. The cub looked at her with wet eyes, his crying reduced to small hiccups and sniffles. She pointed at the bent ear, then at herself, then made a gesture she hoped meant help or fix. The mother stared at her without understanding. Tried again. She touched her own ear, then mimed straightening something, then pointed at the cub's bent ear. She smiled as gently as she could. For a long moment nothing happened. The mother looked at, seeking guidance. The clan leader stood very still, his amber eyes fixed on. He was thinking, weighing risks and possibilities. Finally, he gave a single small nod. The mother loosened her grip on the cub, just enough to let move closer. Reached out and touched the bent ear with careful fingers. The cub flinched but did not pull away. His mother held him steady, her whole body tense with fear. The cartilage was exactly what it expected. Soft, flexible, not broken at all. It had simply grown in the wrong position, probably during the first few weeks of the cub's life. Left alone, it would stay bent forever, but with a little help it could be fixed. She stood up and held out one finger to the crowd. Wait, she hoped they understood. Then she walked back toward her hut. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her back, could hear whispers rising like wind through leaves, but she did not turn around. In her hut, she opened her medical kit and searched through the contents. Bandages, antibiotics, pain medicine, needle and thread, and there at the bottom of the kit a roll of medical tape, waterproof, flexible, strong, designed to hold bandages in place on human skin to survive sweat and movement in time. She also grabbed a flat wooden stick, the kind used to check throats back on Earth. It would work as a splint. When she returned to the crowd, they watched her with a mix of hope and doubt. The mother had not moved. The cub had stopped crying, too tired to continue. His bent ear hung limply against the side of his head. Knelt again. She held up the tape and the wooden stick so everyone could see them. Simple tools, nothing magical, nothing special. She spoke softly to the cub, knowing he could not understand her words, but hoping he could understand her tone. "This might feel strange," she said, "but I need you to stay very still. Can you do that for me, just for a few minutes? I promise it will not hurt." The cub blinked at her. Something in his eyes shifted. Maybe he understood. Maybe he was just too exhausted to fight. Worked carefully. First, she gently unfolded the bent ear, straightening the cartilage with slow, steady pressure. The cub whimpered but held still. His mother stroked his head, making soft sounds of comfort. Once the ear was straight, placed the wooden stick against its back, creating support. Then she began wrapping the tape around both, holding the ear in its new position. She was careful not to wrap too tight, not to cut off blood flow, not to cause pain. She had done this for puppies and kittens many times. The technique was exactly the same. The whole process took 4 minutes. When she finished, the cub's ear stood straight up, held in place by the tape and splint. It looked strange, wrapped in white material, but it was straight. For the first time since had seen him, the cub's ears matched. He blinked. His ears twitched, both of them testing the new position. The bent ear did not fall. It stayed where it was supposed to be. The cub's eyes went wide. He let out a small sound, not a cry but something closer to wonder. He reached up to touch his ear, and his mother gently stopped him, understanding without words that he should not disturb the wrapping. Sat back and smiled. "Keep that on for a few weeks," she said, even though she knew he could not understand. "Do not take it off. Do not get it wet. Just let the cartilage heal in the right position. You will be fine." She stood up and turned to face the crowd. No one moved. No one spoke. They stared at her with expressions she could not read. Some looked confused. Some looked frightened. Some looked like they had just witnessed the impossible. Stepped forward. His face was calm, but his ears swiveled constantly, a sign of deep emotion. He stopped in front of and looked down at her, then at the cub with his newly straightened ear. He said something in his language. Did not understand all the words, but she caught the meaning from his tone. "What did you do?" Did not know how to explain. She did not have the words in their language to describe cartilage and tape and support structures. So she simply pointed at the cub, then made a gesture that meant wait and time. "The answer will come later. Just wait and see." Stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. The crowd began to scatter. The mother picked up her cub and carried him toward their home. She paused as she passed, and for just a second their eyes met. The mother did not smile. She did not speak, but something in her gaze said thank you in a way that needed no translation. Walked back to her hut alone. Her hands were shaking now that the moment had passed. She had no idea if her fix would work. No idea if they would accept what she had done or punish her for interfering with their sacred rituals. All she could do was wait. And hope. She repaired the cub's bent ear with tape, Part 4. The days that followed were the longest of life. She watched from her hut as the village returned to normal routines. Hunters left at dawn and returned at dusk. Children played in the hot springs. Elders told stories by the fire. But underneath the normal activity could feel something different: attention, an expectation. They were all waiting to see what would happen to the cub. His name, she learned, his mother was called, a young female who had lost her mate to a hunting accident the year before, was her only child, her whole world. Every day checked on from a distance. She could not approach him directly, not without causing trouble, but she watched. She made sure the tape stayed in place. She looked for signs of infection or pain. There were none. Played with other cubs, carefully avoiding rough games that might disturb his wrapped ear. His mother watched him constantly, never letting him out of her sight. The whole clan watched too, curious about the soft-skinned stranger's strange magic. After 18 days, decided it was time. She gathered her courage and walked to his home. It was larger than her own hut, closer to the center of the village. Saw her coming and stepped outside, her body tense with protective instinct. Pointed at who peeked out from behind his mother's legs. Then she pointed at the wrapped ear and made an unwrapping motion with her hands. Time to take it off. Hesitated, fear flickered in her eyes. What if it did not work? What if the ear fell again? Hope was a dangerous thing, it hurt more than acceptance. But finally she nodded. She picked up and sat down on a wooden bench outside their home. The cub looked at with nervous eyes. A crowd began to gather. Word spread fast in the village. By the time knelt in front of, half the clan had assembled to watch. Worked slowly, carefully peeling away the tape layer by layer. The adhesive had held well despite the fur. The splint came away easily, revealing the ear underneath. Everyone held their breath. The ear stood straight, perfectly straight. It matched the other ear exactly, tall and proud the way a ear should be. His ears twitched, both of them, moving together perfectly synchronized. He could hear, he could move them, they worked. For a moment no one moved. Then let out a cry that echoed through the valley. She grabbed her son and held him tight, tears streaming down her furry face. Laughed and wiggled his ears again and again, delighted by the freedom after so many days. The crowd erupted, pushed forward to see, to touch, to believe what their eyes told them. The ear was fixed, the curse was broken, the impossible had happened. Appeared at the front of the crowd. He stared at its healed ear for a long time. Then he turned to and slowly, deliberately, lowered himself to his knees. He pressed his forehead to the ground at her feet. The clan leader, the most respected in the village, bowing to her. One by one other followed. The healer, warriors and hunters, mothers and elders. They knelt and pressed their foreheads to the earth, a gesture of deep respect that had never seen before. She wanted to tell them to stop. She wanted to explain that it was nothing special, just tape, just simple knowledge that any human learned in basic first aid training. She was not a miracle worker. She was just a doctor who knew a few things. But the words would not come, and even if they did, they would not understand. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Was moved to a new hut, larger and closer to the center of the village. Food appeared at her door in greater quantities, finer cuts of meat, rarer fruits. Who had avoided her before now approached with shy smiles and small gifts. And they brought her patience. First came a hunter named who had fallen from a tree and landed on his shoulder. The joint was out of place, causing terrible pain. Recognized the problem immediately. A dislocated shoulder. She had fixed dozens of these in the emergency room back home. She positioned carefully, explained through gestures that it would hurt for a moment, then pulled hard and fast. The bone popped back into the socket with a sound that made everyone flinch, gasped, then laughed as he moved his arm freely for the first time in days. Another miracle. Then came an elder named with a wound on his leg that had turned red and hot with infection. Cleaned it with boiled water, applied antibiotics from her kit, and bandaged it properly. Within a week, the infection was gone. Then came a pregnant female in trouble. The baby was positioned wrong, turned the wrong way for birth. They had given up hope, but talked them through a technique to turn the baby, using pressure and position and patience. Hours later, a healthy cub was born, crying loudly, perfect in every way. Each success made her status grow. They began to call her by a special name, one that took her weeks to understand fully. Humens, a title of honor, a recognition of something greater than simple skill. But grew worried. She knew her medicine would run out eventually. The antibiotics were almost gone. The tape was half used. She could not perform miracles forever. Sooner or later, something would happen that she could not fix, and then what? Would they hate her for failing? Would they realize she was just an ordinary human with ordinary knowledge? She tried to explain. In her broken, she told them that she was not special, that all humans knew these things, that what she did was normal where she came from. They smiled and nodded and did not believe her. To them, she was magic. She was a gift from the stars. She was proof that the universe was bigger and stranger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined. And deep down, in a place she did not like to examine too closely, began to wonder if maybe they were right. Not about her, about humanity. What did it mean that ordinary human knowledge seemed like miracles here? What did it say about her species, about all the centuries of accumulated learning passed down from generation to generation? Every doctor who had ever lived, every scientist, every teacher who had shared knowledge with a student, they had all contributed to this moment. The tape in her hands was the result of thousands of years of progress. Maybe that was the real miracle. Not her, not the tape, but humanity itself. She repaired the cub's bent ear with tape, Part 5. 6 months had passed since the crash. 6 months since Park had fallen from the stars and landed among the village was different now. Better, she thought. She had taught them how to boil water to kill invisible things that caused sickness. She had shown them how to make simple splints from wood and cloth. She had explained the idea of washing wounds before treating them. Small changes, simple ideas, but they had already saved lives. Had grown in those 6 months. His ear stood tall and straight, no different from any other cub. He followed around the village whenever he could, watching her with hero worship in his big amber eyes. She had become his favorite person in the world, the strange, soft-skinned creature who had given him his future back. Tonight, the central fire burned bright as the clan gathered for a feast. The harvest had been good this year. Hunters had returned with plenty of meat. There was reason to celebrate. Sat in a place of honor near and the other clan leaders. 6 months ago, she had been an outsider, barely tolerated. Now she was something else entirely. Not quite one of them, but not separate either. Something new. Something they had no word for. The feast ended late, when the moon hung high overhead, and most of the cubs had fallen asleep in their mother's arms. The crowd slowly scattered, heading home to rest. But remained by the fire, and so did. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Had improved greatly over the months. She could hold conversations now, could understand jokes and stories and subtle meanings. But sometimes silence was better than words. Spoke first. His voice was low and thoughtful, his amber eyes reflecting the dying flames. "You have changed us," he said. "Changed my people, changed how we see the world." Shook her head. I did very little, taught simple things. Any human could have done the same. You say this often, turned to look at her. That you are ordinary, that your knowledge is common, that what you do is nothing special. Because it is true. Made a soft sound, almost like a laugh. You came from the stars, humans. You fell from the sky in a metal bird. You carry tools that can cut cleaner than our sharpest stone. You have medicines that fight enemies we cannot see. You fixed my nephew's ear with a strip of white material. He paused, letting the words settle. If this is ordinary among your kind, then I do not think you understand what ordinary means. Did not know how to respond. She stared at the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker. Tell me about your home, said. Tell me about this place where everyone can do miracles. Thought about Earth, about cities full of millions of people, about hospitals where doctors performed surgeries that would seem like impossible magic to the about airplanes that flew across oceans and computers that held all human knowledge and farms that grew enough food to feed billions. She thought about war, too, about poverty, about all the terrible things humans did to each other. They were not perfect. They were not even close to perfect. But they had learned. Generation after generation, they had learned. My people are not so different from yours, she said carefully. We fight. We make mistakes. We hurt each other sometimes, but we also learn. We teach our children what we know, and they teach their children, and so on for thousands of years. Everything I know, someone taught me, and someone taught them, and someone taught them before that. She picked up a small stick and drew a line in the dirt. Imagine each person is like this line, short, small, not very important by itself, but when you put many lines together, she drew more lines, connecting them, building a pattern. You get something bigger, something that no single person could make alone. Studied the pattern in the dirt, his ears swiveled thoughtfully. Your people work together, even across generations. Yes, we call it knowledge, wisdom, history. Each generation adds a little more, a little improvement here, a new discovery there. Over time, the small things become big things. A strip of tape comes from thousands of years of learning about materials and chemicals and how things stick together. Was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice held something new, wonder maybe, or hope. Then your miracle is not the tape, he said slowly. Your miracle is the learning, the passing down, the chain that connects your ancestors to you. Smiled, yes, I think so. Stood and looked up at the stars. Followed his gaze to the unfamiliar patterns scattered across the dark sky. Somewhere up there, she said, there might be ships looking for me, or there might not be. I do not know if I will ever go home. And if you stay here, asked, among my people, what then? Considered the question. She thought about teaching, about sharing everything she knew slowly and carefully in ways that could understand and build upon. She imagined them, generations from now, with their own doctors and scientists and teachers, their own chain of knowledge started by a single link. Sorry. Then I will teach, she said, everything I know, and your people will learn, and they will teach their children. And someday, a long time from now, I might look back and think of this moment as the beginning of something wonderful. Turned to face her. His amber eyes were serious but kind. You would do this, give us your knowledge freely. It was never mine to keep, said. It belongs to everyone who came before me. Teachers and doctors and scientists I never met. I am just passing it along. That is what humans do. Placed his large furred hand on her shoulder, a gesture of deep respect among the. Then you are more than humans, he said. You are who teaches, and my people will remember you for 1,000 generations. Felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them away and smiled. Later that night, she climbed the ridge above the village and sat alone under the alien stars. She thought about home, about her mother, about all the things she might never see again. But she also thought about the future, about growing up strong and healthy, about cubs learning to read and write, about a whole civilization taking its first steps toward the stars. She was just one person, one ordinary human woman with some medical training and a roll of tape. She could not change the universe. But she could teach. She could share. She could add her small line to the pattern and trust that others would continue after her. That was what humanity did. That was what made them special. Not strength, not speed, not any single miracle. Just the stubborn, beautiful, unstoppable habit of learning together and never giving up. Smiled at the stars. She was home,